Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I've got a little bit of a story to tell you guys today about my red Mini, specifically with the ignition system. And I'm going to start out with a little bit of a backstory and then we'll get into what happened to it. So last week when I was shooting my cold start video, I came out here, started the car up. It started up okay, as you saw from the video. But I finished the film, turned it off, and then I went to drive it because I wanted to take it out for a test drive and include that driving footage. But my ignition switch decided to fail, and I don't know exactly what happened, but it just wouldn't crank over anymore. And recently I've been noticing that I'd put the key in and I'd be able to get it to, turn on. Sometimes I could flick the key really hard and get the ignition switch to trip the starter. Sometimes it wouldn't. So it was starting to act intermittently, but ultimately it just failed. But yeah, this is a situation that I'm dealing with right here. No starter. But I have power, you can see at the fuel pump. So clearly there's a problem going on with the switch. Thankfully, this part failed while I was in the garage. Otherwise, this would have been a nuisance to have to deal with on the road. Obviously, once I got it running, I probably could have jumped it or something, got it running, and then just driven home. But uh, the key is still unlocking the column, so I can still, turn the steering wheel. It's not locked. It's not a problem. It's just an electrical issue going to start the starter solenoid. Now, I'm not actually surprised that this switch failed. And to understand my lack of surprise, we need to go back in time to when I first purchased this car. When I first purchased this Mini, it was basically just a rolling shell. There was hardly any interior pieces. The engine was missing. Most of the electrical parts were missing. So it was a really bad shape. Body-wise, it was in good shape, but mechanically and interior-wise, it was a disaster. The ignition switch over here, for some reason, had been torn apart, and its guts were nowhere to be found. This ignition switch here, when I first got my car, all the guts were missing. It was basically just a bare circuit board and then the wiring coming off of it. So I was missing all of the internal pieces that go in here. The common sense solution would be to go look for one of these ignition switches. Um, they make plenty of aftermarket parts for these cars. So why wouldn't one of these switches be one of those pieces that you could buy? It seems like a fairly common problem to have. An ignition switch gets used all the time. So why wouldn't it be remanufactured by someone for, replacement on one of these cars once they fail? Well, the problem is that this column is unique to an early Mark III. It was only a couple of years of production, and then they changed designs to the later system where the key comes in at a 45-degree angle instead of 90 degrees to the column, like this one here. For comparison's sake, this is the later Mark III column design that I'm talking about, where the key comes in at a 45-degree angle. Since the switch for my column wasn't being reproduced by aftermarket suppliers, my choices were to either replace the entire steering column assembly just to be able to use the new modern switch, trying to find an original switch, used switch, or try to repair what I had at the time. This is a switch assembly. Several years ago, while I was still rebuilding the car, I opted to repair what I had by taking parts out of a new but similar Triumph ignition switch. I believe this is TR6. This family of switch operate the same way. There's a sliding set of contacts which run across these contact pads here, sending power to where it is needed. There's a series of ball bearing detents, and there's a little profile for the plastic piece to slide along to stop at each position. And then this little ramped area here is the actual starting springback section when you're cranking the key over. This is the part that you're pushing against. Internally, these are the same. The piece that goes in here, the springs, the contacts, all that stuff is the same as this one. So by taking the necessary parts and combining them into the original housing, I was able to save the original switch over here and get my car running. Now, this repaired switch lasted about 2,000 miles. So, why did this repaired switch fail? Well, let's take a closer look. The switch is designed to interlock against a square post coming out the back of the lock cylinder. You can see this square profile here. Upon close inspection, this square post had been worn into sort of an oval shape. This extra space is what was preventing the switch from being able to fully rotate with the key and stop the electrical contacts from reaching the starting position. So if I use a screwdriver here, I'll demonstrate how the key operates the switch. So in that position, the key is off, car's off, key's out. As soon as I rotate it over one notch, that is accessory. The next position is running. And then finally, we have the cranking position. And you can see it still springs back just fine. It seems to me that the material quality of the plastic, this white plastic out of this switch, was not strong enough to hold up to the cranking forces involved, and it ovaled out the square shape and prevented the switch from being able to fully rotate all the way around. So now I was back to square one again. I needed to decide what to do. I could either try to find another one of these Triumph switches, or some other version, hoping that the material would be in better quality, or find one of these and expect to have to do this repair again in a couple thousand miles. Or I could try once again to find an original switch. Well, as luck would have it, I managed to find an original switch. This is a new old stock being sold by a repair shop, I think in Florida. They were basically selling off their old inventory. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, new old stock, or NOS, means that the part was manufactured by the original part manufacturer, in this case Lucas, and it was old stock, meaning it's an original part, and this one is from 1971, about mid-year production. This one is early. I think this is a week 4. Yeah, this is a week 4. This one was a week 31. So for the shop selling the switch, it was just an old switch, but to me it was absolutely as valuable as gold. So after receiving my new old stock switch in the mail, took the column covers off, took the old switch out, put the new switch in, hooked up the electrical, and the car was back to starting like it had always started before. For those of you who may have these types of parts collecting dust in your garage or your barn, or if you have a shop who has a bunch of these things and you don't have any clients because honestly these cars aren't coming in for service work in these days, please consider making them available because you just might make someone's day. So thanks for watching. I'll see you guys soon.